a Kansas Hoops podcast. First and foremost, I just wanted to say thank you for everybody who tuned in to our last episode, the season preview, and talking with Mike about the NCAA infractions case. We are just super, super excited to continue doing this season and be with you guys through this ride, which is the college basketball season, the KU basketball season. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We're going to be grinding this year, Bez.
Yeah, 100%. It was a great start. It's going to be a great 40 more episodes, we think, hopefully. Unfortunately, we might have been the only ones affiliated with the Kansas basketball program to get off to a good start.
Yeah. Well, obviously yesterday, Sunday, Kansas played Illinois in a charity exhibition. Illinois raised over $1 million for the Maui, for the wildfires there. Great cause. But the Jayhawks did not look too great out on the floor. They fell 82-75, and today we're going to break it all down.
Yep.
So stay tuned. Without further ado, here we go again. Episode 2 of The Hum, a Kansas basketball podcast. As we know, there weren't too many positives for Kansas last night out on the floor. They led Illinois for just 1 minute of total basketball time. We're going to talk a little bit about what Kansas did well first, but I mean, I think just first, the positive that we can take from this game, that Bill Self can take from this game, he can tell his team in practice now that, hey, we might be a little soft. We might not be the preseason number one. Let's fix some things.
No, I think this was the perfect outcome in terms of a long-term standpoint of what could have happened, because Kansas still competed. It was a game for 40 minutes against an Illinois team who's probably better than 25th ranked. I think you'd agree with me. I think they're a little underranked. And so you see that even when this team plays poorly, they still compete against a good team on the road, and they lose. So they're soft. Bill, that's he's been saying that since I've been alive. So
I think if anybody proved something last night, if there's any positives to take away, I think it was the performance that Kevin McCullough showed us last night. I
100%.
mean, the guy was hooping. If he can bottle that, I think Kansas is going to have a good season. He finished with 25 points, 8 rebounds, 1 assist. Surprisingly, Kevin McCullough, no steals or blocks, but he was very active on the defensive end. What do you just take away from Kevin McCullough's performance yesterday?
I mean, I think the first thing that I take away, and we harped on it in the first episode, is the 2 threes that he hit were in rhythm, catch and shoot, full confidence, no hesitation, which is exactly what we wanted to see out of Kevin McCullough in terms of his aggressiveness and his comfort level shooting the 3 ball. And then also just in general, his efficiency. He started off a little slow and then finishes 9 for 14 from the field, 2 of 3 from 3. I think if like you said, maybe the only positive we can take away from this game is Kevin McCullough. And I think it's a huge positive if we even get 80 to 85% of that and 100% of that confidence. Like you said, even though he didn't get any steals or blocks, that doesn't mean he wasn't a 0 on the defensive end. He's still very active. And even though activity on the defensive end was a little lacking in terms of all 5 guys on the floor.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of alluded to it last pod. McCullough could take a Jalen Wilson type jump this year, and 25 points in the first game is taking a step in that direction.
Yep.
The real question is, though, can he do this consistently? And can he be more of a one-on-one type of player that Jalen Wilson was for Kansas last season? I mean, he showed yesterday that he could get points off of his actions, off of cuts. But he really didn't kind of go at Illinois one-on-one as much as, Jalen Wilson could last year. And I'm not sure he's there yet, but if he can get there, man, I think Kevin McCullough could be the X factor, could be the scorer that Kansas really desperately needs this season.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily think he's ever going to be a one-on-one threat to Jalen's level. But, I mean, like I was saying, he's Bill's Swiss Army knife, where we saw all of the different elements of him cutting backdoor and flashing high post, even handling the ball at the top of the key, initiating the offense, all of those things I think are going to happen every game all season.
Yeah, and another person I think kind of showed a little bit of flashes last night, KJ Adams. He finished with 14 points, playing next to Hunter Dickinson. Finally, KJ isn't playing against five men. He got to play against somebody his size, somebody even a little smaller than him. I mean, KJ, he had some nice dunks. He was pretty active defensively. Ultimately, though, Bez, I think he kind of looked a little too much like the player of last season for Kansas.
Exactly. I completely agree. And I think we're going to see, especially in these non-conference games, he's going to look like a kid in a candy store with these 6'5", 6'6" forwards playing against him instead of 7-footers like last year. He had a couple drives where he'd go straight at a guy like he did last year, where he showed some aggressiveness. But yeah, like you said, there was no leap that KJ Adams took. There wasn't he took 1 3 in the first half that did not look close whatsoever, but he shot it with confidence at least. We might not see that a whole lot more after that performance, but in general, he's still great. I mean, he's still KJ. If we don't get a massive improvement out of KJ, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world, because I'll take what he gave us last year against fours instead of fives, 100%. But I think we're all kind of wanting to see him, be able to take guys off the dribble pretty consistently. And I think Coach Self is honestly expecting it and needing it.
Not only taking guys off the dribble, but I really think KJ needs to open up the floor just a little bit more. If it's from the mid-range, if it's from, the high post area, some sort of element needs to be added to this Kansas offense. I mean, the floor looked small last night, and I think KJ Adams really was a big part in that. I mean, Illinois sagged off of him the whole entire game.
Yeah,
Illinois did not pressure KJ Adams whatsoever. Now KJ took advantage of that sometimes. He got some cuts, he got some lobs, but if teams are gonna sag off of him, it might not end up being a good thing for Kansas.
No, and it's interesting because him and Hunter did some pretty good things together, I thought, when one of them has the ball in the middle of the paint or the high post, and the other is flashing from the weak side corner. That is going to work 100 times out of 100, because getting both of those guys within 10 feet of the basket running a two-man game is pretty tough to stop. But outside of that, actually getting to that point is pretty impossible with KJ's lack of ability to stretch the floor. And Hunter was struggling already on the offensive end, was clearly anxious. First real game for Kansas. Was greeted so ever so lovely by the Illinois faithful, his bestest of friends up there in Champaign. So already, and now you bring KJ right next to him, and it's an immediate double team. I mean, Hunter's like, okay, I need some space to operate here, and KJ's not allowing that right now. But it's new, it's fresh. They'll work it out. They're still kinks.
I mean, shooting and spreading the floor is probably what was Kansas's biggest flaw, biggest question mark coming into the season. And let's be honest, it was exposed a little bit last night. I mean, Kansas attempted 12 threes. 12.
Not enough. Yeah.
12 threes. Even Bill, whenever I really loved how the Big Ten Network did those.
Yeah, they were sweet.
They asked Bill, "You've taken 8 threes. What's going on?" He's like, "Yeah, we need to take more threes." And Kansas did not take more threes, and the game ended the way it ended.
Yeah, and any successful Bill Self team is a threat from the 3-point arc. Bill's never been, a run and gun type, let's chuck up 43s and see how many we can hit. But there needs to be more than 12. And a lot of that was they're not really running a whole lot of offense. It's a nationally televised exhibition game. So you're not going to, like, towards the end, actually, the last 4 minutes when the game was actually close, there was a lot of movement and a lot of screens and a lot of, and out of timeouts. Bill was masterful as always. But in terms of kind of, and this is where our lack of one-on-one kind of hurts them, is where in a game where they're not running a ton of offense and they need to generate it themselves, they don't really have a guy to say, okay, bring it out, set the floor, and let me go, like Frank used to do. There's no 0 on this team. There's not.
Yeah, I mean, the perimeter shooting right now is non-existent. And since 2015-16 season, kind of the modern Bill Self teams, KU has averaged over 20 threes a game. Yep. The lowest season that they had was 19-20, and that was with Doak playing the 5, and they still shot 18 threes per game that season.
And Dotson running the point, who was kind of like DeJuan, not exactly a threat from 3.
Yeah, and he was a driver, put his nose down. He still threw up a
Right.
lot of shots, but the perimeter shooting, Kansas still had answers there. I mean, right now this year, it is not looking good.
Yeah, and especially when Timberlake is coming off the bench pretty cold and El Marco isn't ready to go yet, that's pretty much a 0 from outside.
Yeah, and Bill's, as you mentioned, Bill Self teams, they really need that, and especially Bill Self teams need volume out of the guard positions. Like, there was no volume last night from El Marco, from DeJuan Harris. They put up 11 field goals combined. The two of them only put up 11 shots. If your guards aren't attacking, Kansas is going to be in trouble. They need DeJuan Harris to be aggressive. Kansas needs El Marco Jackson to be aggressive, or else this team offensively is going to be in some trouble.
Yeah, I mean, not to overreact to an exhibition game, but El Marco needs to be just more. Just everything just needs to be way more with him. More aggressive, looking to drive into the paint more, looking to kick more, being more aggressive on defense. I mean, he looked lost on defense a couple times on some switches. He was in the help position wrong twice in the first half, and that's why Bill yanked him quickly. We saw some flashes in transition where he can, get to the rim, but
in transition.
Transition, actually, Kansas looked pretty solid in, and is going to be potentially pretty scary, especially with Hunter trailing and the ability to knock down a top of the key 3-pointer. But I mean, to go back to, that guard point, the best team, in my opinion, that Bill Self has had in the past decade is Frank Mason's senior year. And a lot of that was because him and Devontae could just take over at any moment and really give you really carry your offense for 15 or 20 minutes straight. And I mean, also they need volume, but they also need minutes. And if neither El Marco or Timberlake is going to step up to that role in the 2 spot, that's going to be a real detriment to Kansas, because that guy needs to play 32 a game.
Frank and Devontae that year put up 23.1 shots per game. They put up more than 23 field goals per game. And if you look at other successful Bill Self teams, the national championship team with Remy and Ochai, they also put up over 21 field goals per game out of the 1 and 2 spot. Kansas just simply needs the volume out of those positions to be able to play at a high level. El Marco, 4 shots, and 1 was a transition layup. Yep. 1 was he came off a screen, hard-nosed drive to the basket. I mean, El Marco just simply needs to be more aggressive.
To kind of bounce off of El Marco's aggressiveness, I think that if this team is gonna, I think we both expect this team to be a 1 seed come March time. If that needs to happen, I really think El Marco is going to have like 13 or 14 a game for Kansas to really be a threat on offense. I mean, we've seen it in past summers in his AAU games. We've seen it on YouTube. The kid has the ability to go get you 30, and we didn't see it on Sunday. I'm not saying we're never going to see it, but another thing we didn't see very much of was guarding, as Bill likes to say. We cannot guard anybody right now.
So we've talked about the offensive end of the floor. Now it's time to talk about Bill Self's bread and butter, the defensive end. Jackson, just what did you see from KU defensively last night, and where do you think Kansas could maybe get better on that end?
I think Kansas can get better at every aspect of the defensive floor, because first of all, Hunter Dickinson, I think you and I could run pick and roll on Hunter Dickinson right now and score some baskets, because Illinois had that boy literally spinning in circles. So that wasn't good. What also wasn't good is the switching, which they've been able to do in the past, especially last year with KJ at the 5, where you can switch everything. But now with Hunter being switched isn't even the problem. It's when you get a guy like Coleman Hawkins switched onto El Marco Jackson, and then that's the most automatic offensive rebound I've ever seen. And Kansas gave up a lot of offensive rebounds, not because they necessarily weren't blocking out, but because they had switches and 6 inches of height differential and guys going after rebounds.
Yeah, and offensive rebounds were a huge issue, but the
Mm.
biggest problem for Kansas last night against Illinois was ball screen defense.
Oh,
And
Lord.
it
Yeah.
was pretty clear from the start of the game that Illinois was going to go right at Hunter Dickinson. I mean,
Mm.
from the jump, Illinois put him in ball screen scenarios, and Terrence Shannon obviously got off to his insane hot start.
Yeah, I mean, like him and Hawkins were lights out, like ridiculous lights out. I think what Shannon might have hit 5 or 6 threes. Like, I mean, and Hawkins, that's obviously Hawkins's game. And against a guy like Dickinson, that's honestly kind of a nice matchup for him because he can stretch the floor on Hunter and still be able to put up a decent fight inside. But I mean, yeah, it was a mess at the top of the key. Anything self tried, hedge didn't work. Even on screens away, where Illinois is doing pin downs to get guys coming off a screen, Hunter is sagging into the lane to try and stop a curl. Guy pops out and then he swings it to Hawkins. Hunter is still 15 feet away from Hawkins. Hawkins doesn't have a guy anywhere near him in the county and can drill it.
Yeah, I mean, Illinois last night, I went back and watched. They scored an estimated 19 points alone off of simply putting Hunter Dickinson in a ball screen. And I'll tell you what, they could have easily had more. I mean, Hawkins missed a lot of open shots,
Yeah.
and off of layups, like Illinois missed a lot of layups off of ball screen scenarios too. And that's really scary. I think the biggest thing is to first just let everybody know what Bill Self wants out of ball screen scenarios.
Right.
There's two parts to a ball screen. You have the on-ball defender, the person guarding the guard with the ball, and then you have the big man. The on-ball defender in Bill Self's defensive scheme, your job is to fight through the screen and get back to your man as soon as you can. That is your job as the on-ball defender. The on-ball defender's job is important, but the big man in this scenario is the most important part to Bill Self's defense. The big man is supposed to hedge the ball handler. Sometimes, that can be a slight hedge. Sometimes it can be a little bit of a sag, a little bit of drop coverage, even though it's not true drop coverage, Hunter standing in the lane. But really what Self wants is that hard hedge, and he wants the big to be able to take the ball handler and not allow him to get in the paint. And last night, Hunter Dickinson did not do a good job of that. Whenever that ball handler came around the screen last night, they put Hunter Dickinson in the blender.
Yeah, and I mean the initial purpose of a hedge is to get the ball handler's momentum going away from the basket by using your big man to push him out that way. And Hunter, not only was he not aggressive enough trying to hedge and get, because especially if a ball handler is coming around off of a screen going left, you want your big to get his right hand out there because that completely blocks his passing lane. Hunter's hands weren't up, his feet weren't set. He was opening his hips completely wide open. So either way the ball handler wanted to go, Hunter didn't have either way closed off. And a guard is going to, like you said, put him in a blender every single time if he's not at least pushing him middle or pushing him baseline. He was just kind of, pushing him almost like straight to the rim for a layup.
If Kansas does this well, the guard should not be able to get to the paint. Hunter should be on his body. And also in the scenario, whenever that big man rolls, Hunter should be able to, at that time, the guard should be able to get back and Hunter should be able to get to the big man if he decides to pass. And last night, it was just too easy for Terrence Shannon getting downhill, going right by Hunter Dickinson, and it simply cannot happen moving forward.
Yeah, no, and Shannon loves playing against Kansas, and especially playing against Kevin McCullough, his old teammate at Texas Tech. So he did not treat this like an exhibition game. I was hoping Hunter would feel the same way, given all of the love that him and Illinois fans have for each other. Just a beautiful romance saga over the past few years. But yeah, Hunter was not aggressive enough on the defensive end. It's going to be a learning curve. It's going to take months, maybe, for him to really hone in on that, but the Big 12 is different than the Big 10 on the defensive end. It is a lot more physical. So that I think should be good for Hunter because he should be able to hedge really hard and sometimes even be physical with that guard and really push him away from the basket. Because Hunter's a really big guy. And he played like he was 6'6", yes, on Sunday. That's what was really the issue.
If I'm Bill Self, I'm showing Hunter Dickinson, Udoka Azubuike on the defensive end.
Absolutely.
Udoka Azubuike was elite at this for Kansas, especially the 1920 season. I went back and watched some of the games. Udoka Azubuike was right there. Nobody was getting around Doke to go to the basket. And if they did get a step, Udoka was wiping it away. And surprisingly, another player who was very, very good at this was David McCormick. David McCormick,
Yeah.
if you watch the national championship game, the first 5 to 8 minutes of that game against Armando Bacot is pretty much a clinic on how Bill Self wants to guard a ball screen. So I think if I'm Bill Self, I'm showing Hunter Dickinson a lot of film and I'm sure he is.
No, and the first two things I think of when I think of Doak and Dave on the defensive end is how active their arms are all the time. Their arms are never at their side. I'm looking at the screenshot that you sent me of Dickinson. The ball screen is actively happening and his arms are at his waist. Like that is unacceptable. So when I think of Doak, when I think of Dave, like you remember Dave coming out on the screen, he's like an actual maniac. That's what Hunter needs to do more of. That's what freaks the guards out. If you have, I mean, Dave's dope. They're 7-footers. They're huge, and they're coming at you. Basically, they look like they're gonna punch you. And Hunter, is like, hey, fine by me. You look good shooting that layup. 2 points. Good job.
I mean, it won't matter how good Kansas's on-ball defenders are, like DeJuan and Kev. Those guys can guard the ball, but it's not going to matter if Hunter Dickinson cannot figure out how to play in ball screen situations. And again, it was the first real look at Kansas this year. Bill Self is going to have these guys in shape on the defensive end once it comes March. I will guarantee that.
There's a reason people have been running ball screens for 100 years. They work pretty well.
Yeah. We kind of want to talk about one last flaw that was pretty evident in Kansas's game yesterday, and that was just the depth. I mean, Kansas had no Johnny Furphy last night. They played 8 guys with Jamar, well, 9 guys because Clements played in the exhibition game. But they were down to an 8-man rotation, and to be honest, Kansas's role players did not look that great last night.
Nope, Timberlake was not what we hoped he'd be coming off the bench. Another guy who, only having 3 returning players is really showing up. I mean, there is a lot of guys who look lost, who are playing lost. Timberlake is one of them. Parker Brown, we want him to be Mitch. That's what we said he needs to be. He needs to watch 100 hours of Mitch Lightfoot film. He doesn't have that. Mitch comes in, Mitch scores 2 points on a little baby jump hook over either shoulder. That was it was a lock. I mean, if you're a betting man, which the jury's out on whether or not we are betting men or not, but if you're listening and you are, and Mitch Lightfoot comes in, hammer that boy to get first basket because that's who Bill's feeding it to. He does not have that faith or trust in Parker Brown yet. Parker hasn't really shown that he can be a consistent scoring threat on the block yet, but at least on the defensive end, he at least showed he is a little bit more athletic than Dickinson. And you would agree, he hedged those ball screens, I think, a little bit better than Hunter did.
Absolutely. But I think the biggest thing that showed last night is just how bad Kansas needs Johnny Furphy.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah,
they need anybody to come in and provide a spark off the bench. And I think whenever Johnny Furphy is healthy, he could potentially be that guy for Kansas. I think Johnny Furphy is going to play 15 to 20 minutes per game this season. I don't think it's unreasonable.
I think he needs to play 20 minutes because he's at least a guy that you can put in that one-on-one guy who can score category. He might be the best guy on the team with that ability if it's not El Marco. I mean, Dickinson obviously one-on-one within 6 feet is what we're looking for. But Furphy can take you off the dribble. Furphy is going to be active on defense. I'm more just excited to see him play because of his play style, playing in Australia. I'm more just intrigued than anything. But boy, Kansas looks very thin and especially if anybody gets in foul trouble, you are going to notice.
Yeah, Kansas right now, I mean, they just need somebody that they can count on off of that second unit. Nick Timberlake, right now, I think Kansas wants him to be that guy. He only took 6 shots last night, and a lot of them were kind of a little bit rushed. Jackson, where do you think kind of Nick Timberlake fits in? Where do you think he could maybe fit in the future for Kansas?
Yeah, first of all, let me take my victory lap on El Marco getting the nod at the 2 spot. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you
Um,
were correct on that.
I mean, unfortunately for both of us, neither of them looked like they deserved it, so it might go to Furphy anyway. But Timberlake, what I liked is in the first half, you see him come off that pin down screen, hit a shot at the elbow in rhythm. That needs to happen 7 times a game, no questions asked. 2 times a game, he needs to come off a screen shooting a three. He's better going to his right than he is coming to his left, I've learned. Yeah, I think he's just kind of going to be that Grady Dick role of coming off screens. I think that's really where Bill's going to find the most comfort in him. And eventually, as people start to defend that, he does have that ability to go by people off, a hard closeout. He can score at the rim. I mean, he's a good finisher. I think maybe that's just because I was watching Towson play other Colonial teams, and those guys don't play in the Big Ten or the Big 12 for a reason. But I mean, I'm hoping Timberlake can settle into that, not the volume that Grady had, but 3 or 4 coming off a screen. And he needs to hit half of those like he does, honestly. To be quite frank with you, Nick, you're going to need to drill 52% from the field and 43% from three.
Yeah, I think he can be maybe an Isaiah Moss type of player
Yeah,
for
great.
Kansas.
Yeah.
I mean, he came in, and people forget that Isaiah Moss was a transfer. He came in, I believe it was from Iowa,
Iowa.
if I'm not
Yep.
mistaken, and really came in and filled that shooting role that Kansas needed that season. I think Nick Timberlake is going to have to be that guy for Kansas, like you said, for Kansas to be the best team in the country. And that kind of brings up this a little closing. Do you think, Bez, that Kansas after that performance is still the best team in the country?
Well, the only other teams I've watched are Tennessee, Michigan State, and Illinois so far. I would not say Illinois is a better basketball team than Kansas. I think we saw possibly the worst game we'll see out of Hunter Dickinson maybe all season. And he's still
23-9.
Still at 23-9. Are you serious? So, I mean, that's a road game at a ranked opponent against another Power 5 opponent. Like, if that's a regular season game, there's obviously, Kansas lost, there's issues, questions. How much do we drop in the rankings? Maybe 1 point, maybe 2. So, in the grand scheme of things, I still would say Kansas 1-8 is the best team in the country. If El Marco / Timberlake don't take a step, and if Dickinson gets exposed in pick and roll all year, obviously no. But right now, I still have faith that those 3 things will figure themselves out.
I think everybody is overreacting. I mean, if you went through the Twitter sphere yesterday during the game, I mean, everybody was freaking out on Twitter.
You would have forgot it was a charity exhibition game, first of all. You'd have thought we were actually at Maui in the championship game against like Duke or something. That's what the reaction was.
It was still a 1-possession game with 4 minutes left.
Right.
As bad as Kansas played, and if Kevin McCullough doesn't slip at the end of the game, I mean, it was still a 5-point game, I believe, at that point. But who knows what happens? I mean, we could have had some electricity at the end for sure. But Kansas didn't look great. I think they'll get better. And it was against a really good Illinois team. So
yeah, Illinois is a top 20 team, maybe even top 15. Like especially if Shannon is going to play that role for them all year and kind of be that guy, they're going to be very solid.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Hum, a Kansas Hoops podcast. We are here with the Under 4 segment, the Under 4 timeout. First things first, Kansas football. How about Kansas football this weekend? I mean, I'm not going to say that we predicted it on the pod, but
we did, though. We completely predicted it on the pod, and is also the reason my voice is pretty scratchy. I was there for the entirety and was screaming for the entirety. My little sister was with me. With my parents came to the game. My little sister came too. So that was really, really cool. It's her first game this year. So, yeah.
That's awesome. I work at a bar here in Lawrence. So Fridays, I'm always working, and usually till about 4 a.m. I didn't wake up on Saturday until about 2 p.m. Kansas obviously was in a little bit of a weather delay, so I didn't miss much of the game, but I was watching the game at home, and the mojo is great. Kansas is playing amazing, and then Oklahoma muffs that punt or the kickoff.
Yeah.
Whenever I think we were winning at that time that Oklahoma muffed it, and I was like, all right, it's happening. I am going to the booth.
Gotta be there.
I'm not even joking. I hopped on my bike and I biked straight up 14th Street. And then I went straight down to the booth, tied my bike on a random place by the booth and went right in. But actually, the first play that I see, the first drive that I see whenever I get inside is whenever Jason Bean threw an interception off that tip pass. And I immediately was thinking, I ruined the mojo.
Your fault. Yeah, I mean, I'm glad I didn't know that you were there because I would have beat you up if you messed the mojo up that bad.
All of my friends were telling me to leave, but I stuck it out.
We're good friends for that.
And Kansas did it. Like the Jayhawks did it. It is a new era in Kansas football. Shout out to Kansas.
Heard it. New era.
New era. So not only is the Kansas football team showing up, but some of our NBA Jayhawks are showing up. What about Christian Braun? 13-7-7 for the Nuggets. I mean, it's just crazy seeing what he's doing out there.
He's a real player. He's a real NBA rotational piece. I mean, we saw in the finals last year. What rookie steps up and puts up 15 on the road in a finals game? Come on, just a kid from Kansas. That's who.
Dog. Christian Braun is a certified dog, and also Grady Dick.
Yeah. I mean, he had his first – he wasn't playing much, but he just last game against the Sixers, Joel also went stupid, but that's par for the course. Grady had 16, 4 threes. That was his first, I think, like real action he got, and he made the most of it. And 4 for 6 from 3 too. So love to see that out of Mr. Dick.
Yeah, and Philly, we got Oubre and Embiid balling out. Philly's off to a pretty decent start.
Yeah, Oubre has been great too. Yeah,
Ochai throwing down some crazy dunks for the Utah Jazz. The NBA Jayhawks so far this year going a little crazy.
Yep.
Now we're gonna move on to the mailbag segment. We have a couple questions for you today from the mailbag. Make sure to follow us on Twitter at humpod_KU. That's where we're going to be posting our mailbag questionnaires, everything like that. First question we got, and we kind of talked about this already. Will Elmarko Jackson stake his claim at the 2 spot?
I think yes. I think Nick Timberlake did nothing to show that it should be him instead of Elmarko. I think Elmarko definitely has the most upside in that position. And if Self is already starting him now, I don't see a path unless Elmarko clearly just isn't ready yet. That would be the only way I see it switch. But I do think Elmarko stakes his claim in the 2 spot.
I mean, we talked about it last episode. Everybody has said that El Marco is the guy that needs to play well to reach Kansas' ceiling. So I think he has staked his claim at the 2 spot. I don't think there's any doubt that he'll probably be there the rest of the year. And Bill Self, he loves his little two guard looks.
He does. He does.
And Marco Jackson's a combo guard. So I think he's probably got the 2 spot locked up. And now we got our last question from the Illinois pod, our boys over there.
Our friends, our field of 68 friends at Illinois.
Why is Hunter Dickinson not able to beat Illinois?
My answer to that is literally the Lil Uzi meme. It's only my 3rd day out here. We just got him. I don't know. That's Michigan's problem, bro.
For real. I mean, I think just the most hilarious part about the whole Hunter Dickinson thing is how much Bill Self enjoyed him being the bad guy.
He even said yeah.
I mean, they interviewed him right at the beginning of the game. They're like, "How's the Orange Crust treating you?" He's like, "Well, they're all on Hunter, so I ain't got to worry about anything. I'm chilling over here. They're on Hunter. It's all good." So Hunter's going to get a lot of that this year.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. We're going to see this at every city that we go to.
Yeah, and Bill Self loves it. I mean, he absolutely loves it.
He loves not being the villain.
Yeah, the Bill Self, he is that guy. He is the villain, and we're here for it. Thank you guys for joining us. That's going to wrap up the pod today, the Under 4 segment. We will be back after the NC Central game. We'll be discussing that game, of course, and then Kansas has an exhibition against Fort Hays State as well. We'll be discussing those. Thank you, everybody, for joining us on episode 2 of The Hum, a Kansas